Today we shall vary our usual sequence rather than beginning immediately with the face of the firstborn and the I am affirmations. We are going to first set the force field for the release of those decrees from your heart today. Today, the Ascended Masters come with a priceless gift. It is a gift of their own Ascended Master consciousness in its full regalia. Were that the extent of their gift, it would be bountiful and more than adequate. But it is not simply to step forth and to bathe your conscious awareness in that Ascended Master consciousness, but equally as important, to transfer to you the knowledge that is power that will enable you to first capture the gift, the vision of that consciousness, not merely as it relates to some transcendent, otherworldly consciousness of the Ascended Masters, but rather the Ascended Master God consciousness in its full impact, operating here in this most physical of worlds. You have, as of yet, but little true sense of co-measurement of that Ascended Master consciousness. In addition to transferring this priceless gift, there will be as well the equally priceless, precious gift of the transfer to you of the empowerment whereby you, if you choose, and if you so determine, you may resolve with a fiery crystallization of your will and your determination, you as well may fix your jaw like flint in the absolute determination that your life shall be as life is lived by the Ascended Masters, not only at inner levels in the Ascended Master octave, but here in this world of form. Now, why, after these many decades of the teachings of the Ascended Masters, do we still speak of the poverty-stricken mortal consciousness, even amongst the students, that does not, as of yet, have that nobility and transcendence in its own cup of consciousness as to be able to contain all that your own mighty presence is within itself? There is quite a distinction between having the intellectual or academic statements rehearsed and having that full measure of the possession of consciousness, which is 9/10 of the fulfillment of the law. And it is to that full measure of consciousness that we would raise you up so that you as well might have that consciousness. Why is this so very important? Because that consciousness, that sense of your own co-measurement, that ability for you to see, to feel, to know in every fiber of your being, in your blood vessels, in your bones, to know that in every fiber of your being as the truth of your own identity will enable you to roll back outer appearances, to make your own pathway through whatever obstacles the modern age may place before you. So, what is it that we are speaking of here in this moment? Well, let us give you a few prosaic examples that may perhaps enable you to be a little bit more sensitive and be able to compare your moment-to-moment state of consciousness with that of the adepts and of the ascended masters, so that you might then be able to sustain a certain vibration of consciousness in your own life. You see, and you have seen over and over again, human portrayals, portraits of the ascended masters as they would appear if they were to manifest. So you see a masculine or a feminine face wearing garments, maybe archaic, maybe more modern. And then it is up to your heart to be able to interpret or to connect with the level of consciousness of the being whose portrait you are putting your attention upon. Likewise, when it comes to what used to be called the chart of the presence, chart as in diagram, chart as in map, chart as in scientifically designed, organized relationship. What you have now is better known as the portrait, the portraiture of your own individualized God being. And we are sure that if we were to hand out now a pop quiz with multiple choice answers and an essay, that many of you, as it relates to the academic right and wrong answers about the nature of that presence, would pass with flying colors. But that is not the same as having the consciousness of the transcendent being, the noble, royal, august personage that is God individualized, as the unique individual being whom you are, as having that level of externalized, accomplished consciousness operating through your outer four lower bodies, tethered to this living, breathing, transcendent, infinite personage, focused as the individualization of your very own presence, whom you are. And it is to this latter standard, this latter consciousness, that we would baptize your consciousness in that resurgam Christos of ascended master state of being and fire, baptizing your emotions with the feelings of that ascended consciousness, baptizing your thoughts with the perfect patterns of that consciousness, baptizing your heart so that it opens and becomes as big as all outdoors, baptizing you as in washing your garments of the four lower bodies until they shine with a whiteness whiter than the sun at noontime, until they take on the resplendency of the being that is your own mighty presence. Mortal consciousness is dull. It is, for the most part, opaque. It is inert. And when it comes to the things, to those realities, those heart-wrenching, breathtaking realities of the truths, the bedrock way that life is lived and orchestrated and constructed at inner levels, there is still a gap. Not perhaps an impassable gulf, but a gap nonetheless between that which is externalized of this consciousness and that which is learned intellectually of this consciousness. It is, from one standpoint, almost humorous, and it relates in many regards to the outer world more perhaps than it does to the students of the light. For you at least have your hearts pliable and open. You at least have the ability to have your world quickened when the ascended masters are present, to sense the nearness of an El Moria, or a Maha Chohan, or a mighty victory. You know their signatures. You know the vitality, the pressure of the light that you are aware of in their presence. But there is still a gap between that registration of their presence and externalizing the full, unmitigated outpouring of your very own being. A few examples of this will suffice. The great cathedrals, since the 1300s, 1400s, and 1500s, throughout the continent of Europe, there have been raised glorious feats of architecture that elevate the imagination, that do indeed capture in the chiseled, carved stone, in the vaulted arches, in the great bay lights of colored windows, all of the sublime beauty of elevating the consciousness, of ennobling the consciousness, of capturing the sanctity and magnificence in stone and glass of the beauty of the Godhead. Yet have these precipitations that are there to the physical senses. Undisputably, they are there as fact. But are they understood? Are they something that the masses of mankind are capable of appreciating when they enter in, or perhaps when they wander through? If you think about the way over the centuries that many of these cathedrals have been utilized, at times past, they became the metropolitan center of commerce. Farm animals were brought there for trading. Bookstalls were set up. And in more modern times, those things have been replaced by an almost incessant stream of tourists walking through in their flip-flops and Bermuda shorts and snap and flash cameras, taking pictures of the Pieta, taking pictures of all of the wonderful illustrations of beauty with a tourist's curiosity. Many times as the Mass is celebrated at the front altar, families are parading through near the back, sampling the wares, just as they would any other secular museum or any other thing that would hold their attention for a period of time. What the Ascended Masters would like you to see today is that where the mind and the heart are enclosed in their own shroud of mortal thought and feeling, no amount of evidence to the contrary from outside is able to speak to the heart and cause the heart to be stirred, cause the imagination to be raised up, cause there to be a linkage of the conscious awareness with the transcendent awareness of the God presence that is going on within. This is the thing that each and every Ascended Master student must likewise contend with to some degree, more or less. And that is the smothering effect of their own remaining thought and feeling world, and the dearth, that is to say, the absence of those pinions of God consciousness flowing forth as wings of extended light and consciousness issuing forth from the heart, from the shoulders, from the mind as the crown chakra open wide, not only intellectually enjoying itself, but actually fully engaged as the extension of the consciousness of the God presence in this world of form. This you are obliged to do, especially if you are in this work to live your life the Ascended Master way of life. If you are in this work to complete the round of your many embodiments for the ascension, if you are in this work because the pearl of great price of your life is the realization of the consciousness of your own mighty I Am presence. And even, frankly, although those are the best goals to have in mind, even if your purposes are simply to have your outer life reflect in its fullness the qualities of perfection that are part of the Ascended Master way of life. If you wish your life to be encircled by the outpicturing of the Ascended Master way of life, then it is necessary for you to have this co-measurement of your own God presence and to enter into that in its fullness. And we will save until the last. The key to all of this and how it can be accomplished on your behalf. Let us take a few more examples of what goes on in the world and what goes on to the extent that Ascended Master students allow themselves, more or less, to be encroached upon by the world's consciousness. One of the things that occurs is there is a temptation to feel as if there are two separate and independent lives that one lives, two separate and independent realms of cause and effect. There is the prosaic outer world with its laws, with its wisdom, its prevailing levels of consciousness, and the track of life that you will live as you carry on your days. And then the other side of it is the life that you will finally achieve to once you have made your transition, once you have, as it were, escaped from this life. Then you will escape or be transformed into the other life, the Ascended Master way of life, hopefully the Ascended Master consciousness. You may be the judge yourself of how much in your the visceral level of your acceptance of your mind, how much do you still feel that there are these two mutually exclusive quasi-realities? The one that is closer and more powerful being the world as we know it by the report of our senses, and the other being the otherworldly inner realms of the Ascended Masters. Rather than having an understanding that there is a divine life that is ongoing, there is a divine creativity that is ongoing, there is an intelligence that is ongoing, and it is possible as that relates to your life, the circumstances of your personal life, to have that inner realm fully engaged in the teeth of your day-to-day life, the problem solvings of your day-to-day life, and from within out, molding and shaping and determining how everything is going to necessarily be obliged to conform to the inner life that is very tangible and real to your God presence. Let us begin with the understanding then that there are realms close at hand that have perfection with a capital P and reality with a capital R. That is to say, they are built upon a firm, changeless foundation. They will endure so long as the will of God determines them to endure. These realms of perfection are in fact not far removed in imagination or vibration, but are very close at hand. And accessible to the diligent student of the light, who will be far more meticulous about the operation of the life forces within themselves, so that they are forevermore attending to and dialing into these levels of God consciousness, rather than capitulating to the outer reports of the senses, accepting those automatically and instinctively and habitually accepting those, and therefore using the powers of their own infinite life to perpetuate the duality of outer appearance as having power in their life and in their world. We have given you one example, the example of the glorious cathedrals and how their message is lost on modern mankind. Here is another example, very appropriate to this question of the ascended master consciousness. Perhaps most of you have had the glorious grace from time to time of getting out in blessed nature, going high into the less populated areas of this country here, North America, or other parts of the world, up into the areas where the snow falls in the winter time. Perhaps you have had the opportunity of being there as the snow is falling in a particular manner, as it many times does. If you've ever been away from all of the noise of cars and trucks and roads and planes and trains back in the back country, when the snow is falling, but there is not much wind, so it is coming straight down in big fluffy snowflakes, you will have been truly blessed if you have ever had your consciousness flow out into that representation of the snow, which is almost like a form of the great sea of universal light and life substance as it moves through space. Perhaps you have felt your consciousness move out miles and miles to the horizon during these snowstorms, and the snow is coming down through the trees. Everything, there is a stillness, and because of the purity of that snow, it is exquisitely, almost painfully beautiful, and you are reveling in that quiet, reveling in the beauty. Maybe you can see across a valley peaks thousands of feet higher up where the snow is falling as well. It's almost as if the whole earth has found a peace and a silence and is being blanketed in a bestowal of a grace of purity that is precipitating out and covering over all of the misfortunate miscreations of mankind. Now, that is the reverie of a heart which is connecting through nature with the consciousness of the Godhead that is engaged through nature in the pure forces of nature in producing such a wonderful, wonderful grace. The modern mortal consciousness we could symbolize by a caravan of snowmobilers coming through that scenery, racing each other at full throttle. How do those snowmobilers experience the mystical sense that you are experiencing? Well, let's see. First of all, they've got their goggles on. They have to be looking out for branches or rocks that are right beneath the trail, so their attention is focused straight ahead. Their ears are deafened by a concussion, a sound that is so loud that it makes the ears ring with the pure concussion of the noise of that cacophony, not just one, but in many cases a whole caravan of these going by. Their gasoline engines are throwing up a haze of carbon dioxide, monoxide, other kinds of smoke, so that if you're not first in line, you've got to wipe your goggles because they're being silted over with the exhaust of the ones in front of you. Of course, you can't forget the speed of these machines that are whirling by so very quickly that outside of the peripheral vision, everything is going by in a whirl. I suppose that what you're experiencing there is a certain exhilaration of danger, of speed, of the conquest of man over nature via machinery. But I think the point that is most important here is that from the time those loud engines are revved up and the individuals go down the trail until they pull up in return, unless they turn them off somewhere mid-course and stop to enjoy nature, they are really confined into that little capsule of noise and grime and vibration and the tunnel vision of having to attend to the dangers and the mechanics of steering that machine and not really experiencing the larger nature that is around. Now, that is an excellent metaphor for much of modern life. Everything is speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. Everybody is focused on the job, on the next thing that has to be done very quickly. The various forms of communication that demand one's attention, the pressures of career, the pressures of the need to support all the debt that has been taken on in order to have the various types of lifestyle many times becomes a perpetual thing that goes on. And the consciousness is straitjacketed into that very claustrophobic form of life that is much more a survival and a confinement than it is a freedom and a liberation. But yet, that modern confinement has become the prevailing opinion, the prevailing wisdom of the time that seeks to legislate or regiment what constitutes reality, both as science, as social science, and as religion, and what is realistic or what is fantasy, what is something that would be an outworn concept. The Ascended Master teachings, in a sense, are like this. They are a transcendent form of beauty that has real substance to it. It has real tangible reality and a breathtaking pathos and beauty about it. But if a life stream's consciousness is, if there is hardness of heart, if there is a shackling of the consciousness of the mind into materialistic beliefs only. It is very much similar to that example of those tourists going through a cathedral. Another way of putting the effect of this, and I believe it was Saint Germain who gave this glyph once upon a time. We asked him how most of mankind viewed the teachings of the ascended masters when they come across them. And he showed us a little sculpture. It was the sculpture of an anthropoid ape that was sitting like Rodin's statue of the thinker. And in the hand of this ape was a bust of Shakespeare, symbolizing the great Shakespearean plays. And you see this anthropoid contemplating, trying to penetrate, trying to interpret, trying to understand Shakespeare. And frankly, that is the case with even the most sophisticated 21st century so-called cultural civilized mind. To them, they can no more penetrate the mysteries of the beauties of the Godhead, of God individualized, of what is meant by the portrait of the I Am Presence, the meaning of the Godhead charioteers, the summoning of nobility and transcendence of Ecce Deus, than could a chimpanzee interpret the corpus of Romeo and Juliet. That is the fixity, the concrete, opaque mind, the mind that does not have the ability for the light of the God presence, the Christ self, to shine through and allow that to register. And hence, where those transcendent realities have no resonance whatsoever, they are discarded, much as if you were to hand the whole anthology of the Shakespearean plays to a troupe of primates in a zoo and turn to one of the plays, would have no meaning whatsoever, because there is not yet that heart that can resonate, or that divine mind that can resonate with the truth of cosmic law. One final example of this that has to do with the way in which illumined hearts are, in a sense, operating in this world. There is the true world of the Ascended Master Octave. Below that, below the world of your own mighty I Am presence, is a whole nother universe known as the music of the spheres, the realms of the causal bodies. Below that, there is another divine world, which is the buddhic world, with the sun behind the sun as its center, with all of those great throbbing veins and arteries of the divine life that flow throughout the length, breadth, depth, and transcendence of that realm, that buddhic realm, that are operating side by side with the confinements of time and space that we have here and now. Really, that buddhic realm is the perfect foundation for all that we see out picturing in nature. It is the substratum, the rock, the foundation of your sanity, of your health, of your mind and feelings, and even of your physical form. It is a realm that exists very close, and you touch it best with your heart. Your heart when it leaps. Your heart when it won't leave you alone. Your heart when it draws you to the masters, when it draws you to your altar. Your heart when it drives you forward to the discovery of the truths of cosmic law, is witness to you of the presence in your outer consciousness of that buddhic realm and of the realms of perfection that are beyond that realm. It is that Hound of Heaven that has been with you and will continue to be with you throughout your life. And yet, for most of mankind, they were born like little kittens or puppies with their eyes shut, blind to the outer world. And to this day, most of mankind are still deaf and blind, even to the nearest of the divine realms. That is the realm of the Christ presence, which is so intricately interwoven with the outer realm. Still, its reality, its practicality, its impact upon life is denied as fanciful, as a fairy tale, as outworn ideas of ancient myths, as one more religious, fanatical faction that is one among thousands that are rampant in the world. So there is that deaf and dumb and blind state, which is there also tragically heartrending when viewed from inner levels. Perhaps some of you are familiar with the biography of Helen Keller, who was herself born from the womb without the gift of sight or the gift of hearing. Oh, what a prison house that must have been or must be today, to have to rely upon the secondary reinforcement of touch as the primary means of conveyance of any form of communication whatsoever. And yet this is the way most of mankind gropes their way, through the looming darkness of the ignorance of lack of understanding that is rampant across the world, that does not elevate the consciousness out of that gloomy netherworld of the psychic and the astral realms, of materialistic, atheistic attitudes, up out of all of that into the realm of the Christ presence and the ascended master realm that overshadows even that realm of the Christ presence. Despite the accuracy of the prevalence of this deaf and dumb, deaf and blind status for most of mankind, there have been, down through the ages, both unascended initiates as well as ascended masters who have parted the veil of mortal consciousness, who have parted the limitations of time and space, and who have stood forth, sometimes publicly and many times interacting with individual life streams who have recorded their visitation. The telling of those stories, the recounting of those visitations with those heavenly initiates remains part of the repository of the efforts of the brotherhood, the ascended brotherhood, to reach through the veil and wherever possible to give mankind an impetus of an understanding as to how they could change their life, a better understanding of the meaning of what it means to be an embodiment, where one has come from and where one is going to. Now, of all things today, there is one simple, all-powerful vision which the Ascended Masters would impart to you. And that is how life looks in the earth plane when Ascended Master intensity of light and radiance is thrown out by the presence of an ascended being or an unascended initiate. How that impacts space, how it impacts events, how it dominates the human condition and the human equation, and how it establishes an inviolate, charged force field of God perfection in which that initiate or that ascended master is operating during the time that their form is lowered into that form. And to give you, as ascended master students, the vision of what that looks like, what that feels like, as a vision of the bar, the standard of how you are expected and capable of establishing that self-same action in your life. We repeat that again. That example of how life is when the Ascended Masters are present, when their radiation is going forth, whether they are physically visible or not. That is how you can and you must enforce that life and consciousness upon your own circumstances, upon every level of your life. First and foremost, and most important of all, is the consciousness that is attendant upon that level of expression. As you have been held in the Ascended Master's consciousness, then you have the standard. You know the level of consciousness that is expected of you and of which you are fully capable. You can't rise into that if you don't have the understanding of it, if you haven't had the experience of it, and if your heart and your imagination have not seen it, have not grasped it with the fullness of your imagination. Now, here is the glorious truth of Ascended Master law that few students have fully grasped for themselves or understood was within their capability. This is to be found, of course, in the understanding that your outer consciousness is but the tip of the iceberg of the unbroken mountain of consciousness that you yourself are, as you are the individualization of your presence. And the realization that as other adepts have done so, you may do likewise to rise into the attunement and the identification with your own mighty I Am presence, such that you open the doorway into the Ascended Master octave directly. You hold that doorway open by the timbre, the quality of your thought and feeling, your word and deed, by the direction of your attunement, by the disciplining of what you suffer your mind and feelings to accept as real, and having opened that door and learned the lesson of identifying yourself as the truth of the individuality of your God presence, to then keeping that doorway open, to have the infinite source of the electronic body stream back down and out into your life and enforce the law of life as it is in the octave of the presence upon everything great and small that comes within the circumference, the hem of the garment of your world. The gift, the most precious gift of all that has ever been given by the Ascended Masters is permission for you and the encouragement and the understanding of the factual truth that you, in fact, are the extension of the unbroken stream of consciousness, of the level of consciousness that you are in the electronic body, the identification with that, the communion with that, and the empowerment that that brings. And understanding as well how in this life and other lives you have unknowingly been your own worst enemy because you have utilized or misused the very power that would make you a god or a goddess, such as an Aphrodite or a Zeus or a Hermes or an Apollo or a Krishna. That very same energy you have turned upon yourself in misguided, ignorant misapplication of the limitless powers of the attention, of the qualifying of that light as thought, the qualifying of that as feeling, the vitalizing of it with the power of the will, of the acceptance, and the wholesale ignorant misuse of that light in destructive thought, feeling, spoken word, action, and so forth. This has caused a total impacting, a total congestion of that open doorway from the electronic body. But it is now for you. If you are going home to the land of the white fire sun, it is for you to open wide that door and to understand that through all of your decrees and everything else, that the power of your own being as the electronic presence that you are is to throw forth such an unmitigated intensity of the sacred fire out, out, out into every aspect of your life, that by the crystallization of your will as the ratification of the will of your presence, that it must, and shall take on the self-luminosity of the perfection of the electronic body. And this we call the Ascended Master way of life, the Ascended Master life. When we speak of the Ascended Master way of life, we're not simply meaning everybody wears pastel colors. We're not simply meaning that meaning that we're fully vegetarian, that we have the outer show of some idyllic outer life. The Ascended Master way of life in its essence is this charge of the Ascended Master God consciousness that rules all of life, that takes dominion over the earth, that takes command in every part of life and enforces the law of the presence as the law of your being, the law of your life in every aspect, that rolls it out from within out and insists that every part of your life shall conform to the perfection that is there in the presence. And above all, amongst those qualities, there is that unfurling of the transcendent nature of the consciousness that the being of your presence is. What do we mean by that transcendent nature? Well, it is a certain nobility of spirit. It is a certain sense that every initiate has, that they are the only begotten of their own presence. They are the firstborn. By laws of primogeniture, which says that in other cultures and ages, it means the firstborn son gets everything. Well, whether you wear a masculine or a feminine form, you are the only begotten of your mighty I Am presence. Firstborn son, firstborn daughter, no difference whatsoever. You inherit it all. And you are the one who has come forth out of the virgin consciousness of that presence. And it is high time for you to wear the garment of that firstborn only begotten in all of its transcendence and all of its nobility. While it might seem to you outwardly that you are going to have to change. Remember that little fairy tale or that little children's story about the poor little ugly duckling that was the runt of the litter, and all of the other friends of this little ugly duckling were growing up to be great things, and here it was, just this little runt of a thing, and it had no idea how it was ever going to grow into something else. You should not feel like something is being asked of you that you are incapable of outpicturing. You shouldn't feel that way because God is individualized. Your mighty I Am presence is an individual being of whom you are a partial expression. And as you wear the garments of that presence, which are as close at hand as the garments of the higher body of the Christ mind, your Christ presence, or as you allow more of that streaming of the electronic body to flow forth, the vestments of that noble nature, that firstborn sense of worth, of intrinsic worth, of belonging, will actually naturally come forth because it is native to the consciousness of your own individualized mighty presence. Your mighty presence, even as it expresses in the Christ, is very adequate to the task of being that transcendent, noble self that from time to time you might feel is beyond you. So you have the opportunity then of outpicturing here and now to throw out from your heart. Throw out means to allow that radiance to just pour forth and to charge space, to charge the atmosphere around you so that it crackles with electricity, so that it has that spin, that intensity that is all driven and fueled perpetually by the infinite radiant source that is the electronic body, that is the fullness of the God individualized being whom you are. So let us, for just a few moments, once again, remind ourselves of what that ascended master charged atmosphere is like, that should be established about our force field. Established during our decrees, carried with us in all the things that we do, carried with us as we problem solve the challenges that face us in our life. The radiance that is thrown out, that throws off all of the din of what we hear, what gets reported to the mind and to the senses, the pressures that are applied upon the feelings. Let us see how that charged atmosphere appears. The first example we can take is the example of our own beloved Master El Morya. Since long before his ascension, wherever this master has moved, there has always been around his person, in the circumstance that surround him, since his Arhat ship and his Adapt ship, there has been this charged force field that has enclosed hundreds of yards more space around him before and after his ascension. In previous embodiments, for thousands of years, whenever there were challenges that this life stream would face, although his life might have been day to day, might have been engaged in low-key activities, when there were those challenges that reared up and would confront him, instinctively he would make this attunement. He would make that arc with his God presence, and there would be such a torrent of a return fire that would come forth, that would flow forth, such a suffusion of love of all things, love from his secret chamber of the heart that would flow forth, that would establish a sense of peace, of well-being, a sense that all was well with life, a sense that all would be well, a sense of command, of God control, of taking dominion, all those things that you naturally associate with the will of God, but are also associated with love as the supreme power of the universe. So that is one example near at hand that each and every one of you may call to this father and brother of yours, who I know stands ready on the instant to fly to your side, to perform the same thing for your life stream as he has done for many others. For I assure you, there are certain elements of the ascended masters who, for want of a better term, let me say, they love a good fight. They are keen to throw themselves into the front lines wherever light battles darkness. And their loyalty to those who are loyal to the light is fierce. beyond all measure. Their championing of your heart flame and of the prerogative of your God presence to win its victory is boundless. And they will reinforce the intensity of your calls and your desire for the light beyond all else that you might expect. Such another one as your beloved Lanello, such another one as beloved Godfrey, his twin flame Lotus. There's a certain cadre that is spoiling to enter into this world and defeat the forces of limitation, of discord and darkness, and to clear a pathway for everyone who is on the path to their ascension. And when you are with this group, there is a fearlessness, there is a never say die attitude, there is a sense that will not yield the slightest concession to human appearance, no matter how strong or entrenched it might be. These ones are going to go through it, and they're going to bring to bear the power of the light of the ascended masters that they know whenever it's present, it never fails. I might say, after the shock troops of those particular ascended masters, the one who comes immediately after them, towering above them, is beloved Mighty Victory, who is there to celebrate the victory of the light, to trumpet the victory of the light over all of those conditions, who is himself longtime compatriot of those who are engaged. And, you know, we're not simply talking, and in fact, we're not really talking about one human being fighting another. We're talking about the purity of one heart flame or many heart flames contending with the pressures of the astral plane, the pressures of the mental plane, all of that accumulated discord, whether it's of one's own karmic making or whether it is reared up in opposition to that light. We're talking about whatever assails the heart flame, whatever would assail the Christ flame in any life stream. That is where this contingent, this cadre is first on the scene and moving into action. So that is one action of what it means to be in this overshadowing light that comes forth. Another action that follows in its wake, because, you know, you can't be always doing swordplay, can't always be simply clearing out the underbrush. That's just the initial stage of creating a platform, a foundation where true culture and God life can then safely come forth. And so there's the building, the resurrecting, the raising up, that whole ideal of raising up the individual Christ identity and collectively raising up the ascended master way of life, the golden age, which is to come forth. Now here's another example of that in the case of a different ascended master. It is the master known as Chananda. There is something that occurs each and every time you are fully engaged in the consciousness where the ascended masters are charging the earth plane as well as the feeling world and the mental world. When they do this, they roll out whatever are the overlays. They roll it back and they establish their ascended master perfection. One beautiful example of this is when the ascended master, whom we know as beloved Mother Mary, appeared south of here in Mexico many hundreds of years ago to a peasant, a young peasant. And he noticed that whenever she came and stood in his presence, all the little ordinary clay pebbles that were on the path, all of a sudden they were turned into turquoises, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, diamonds. They were all precious stones. The dust became gold dust. So the radiance of this ascended master shone through common clay, common sedimentary rock, and fired it with the fire that was within the white fire core of that non-luminous, ordinary substance. And it produced this exquisite, magnificent beauty that remained as long as her aura charged that space. And that is the equation of every ascended master and the ascended master light. And here is how it was described. This particular description is very telling. It is very scientific. It has certain keynote signatures and hallmarks that shout cosmic law. They're given in such a low-key manner that you might hardly even notice them. All the more reason to trust their veracity and the veracity of the testimony of the messenger who retold the story, because it is a consistency that is there whenever the ascended masters are tangibly present. Now, at the time, they are in the Indian subcontinent, a part of the world that is more known for its poverty than it is for its luxuriance. And on this occasion, they had been traveling by a railroad in a private railroad car, and the railroad car had been pulled off to a spur, sitting opposite the main railroad line as they were going about their work. And here's where the episode in case took place. We motored back to our private railroad car and found that it had been run out onto a spur of track into surroundings that looked like a flower garden, with a beautiful fountain playing just outside the windows as we dined. We all commented on the ability of Chananda to have constantly beautiful things always expressing. And with one of his smiles that gave you the sense of sunshine personified, he replied, "It is really much easier to express the beautiful because it is the natural, because it is the true expression of the mighty I Am presence within everyone. Whenever any life stream fully accepts this glorious presence, and they feel it and know it as the one presence of the Godhead, doing all things through them, doing all things on their behalf, then the rest of that life stream's experiences must conform to the marvelous beauty and perfection of the presence. The full acceptance of the presence by the embodied individual commands, always governs all outer experiences harmoniously. It is only when one truly fully accepts this glorious presence within himself that he becomes a true chalice for divine service. Then, as the perfection of the mighty I Am presence begins to be released in greater and greater degree through the outer consciousness, the personal self sees and feels this mighty inner presence, knowing its full power, majesty, and mastery. So, paraphrasing Chananda says, the reason it always seems so beautiful around me is because everything is charged with the fire of my presence. So, ordinary prosaic surroundings take on an unnatural, supernatural radiance and beauty and magnificence, which is more to be accounted by the presence of that light. And this is the way that he was encouraging all of the students to be able to use that same means of producing perfection for them that he had used for himself. The work of the ascended masters, the work of their activity, the temple of the presence, is to somehow keep trumpeting this level of consciousness, extolling its value and its virtue, transferring the ingredient of that consciousness, the ingredient of that fire, and transferring the encouragement and initiating some fine tethering thread of contact with the consciousness of the electronic body so that that little fine thread can widen and widen and widen so that it can actually become the standard of consciousness, which you compare other experiences that you may have, other thoughts that go through your mind, other feelings that would be impulses that would come out of your world. And God willing, the time, if it has not yet, will arrive for you, where there will be such a direct outpouring from that mighty presence that you know the taste of that. You know the fragrances, the perfumed fragrances of that inner presence. You know the pressure of that light. You know the sense of protection, of well-being, of infinite destiny calling you. You know the close communion with that glorious presence. You know what it means to bask in that light and life, especially the particular frequency of that when it is raised to the level of the electronic body. And once you have truly for yourself tasted of that blessed wine of the consciousness of your presence, you will not wish to ever lose it ever again. And if in an unguarded moment or some temptation comes by and you do lose that direct connection, you're going to say, where did it go? Come back. I'm coming back. Return to me. And you're going to redouble your efforts to attain to that level of frequency of consciousness. You're going to keep notes of what may have contributed to your losing that consciousness. You're going to write down that in your tablets of memory, and you're going to say, I'll not do that again, because the price is too great. It's not worth it. Besides which, there is such a fullness of life. There is so much joy and fulfillment. There's so much living to do in the mighty presence. Not a moment of time to be wasted. And that's the goal that the Ascended Masters have for you, is to understand that the path is a rich life that has its own rewards. It is its own reward. The path is not a system of do's and don'ts because you don't want to spend eternity in hell. It's not a system of abstinences that you do because you learn them in a book somewhere and you better do them because you want to get to your ascension, so you'll give up things you'd otherwise like to be doing now. No, it's not that. The path is not a question of holding your breath in between decree sessions or conferences when you merely exist until the next draught of Ascended Master light. The path is a brand new life that colors every aspect of your day-to-day experience. That's part of our mission as the Temple of the Presence, is to manufacture all of the accoutrements of the Ascended Master life, Ascended Master way of life and culture, so that every bit of one's life, from their recreation to their social interactions, to their entertainments, to their meditations and their imaginations, that no matter where their attention rests, there's something to live their life that enriches the quality and the fabric of the true Ascended Master way of life. Now, part of this precious gift, part one, was this vision of what a different world it can be and what a different life it is when there is this charge of Ascended Master fire. That's part one, to know that, to register it in your consciousness, and to have it really etched very clearly. Okay, this is the standard. It's like whether you are a pole vaulter or you are a high jumper in the Olympics, they have a bar that they set. And you either use the help of a pole to reach that, or you just jump. In any case, what we're doing is we're setting the bar, the standard, the minimal level of consciousness that is compatible and intrinsic to the Ascended Master consciousness. And that is when the fullness of this is present. The second part of it is the understanding that it is produced by the individualized presence living in the body temple of the electronic body. And that body is of such a nature, of such power, that when the heart flame in the four lower bodies learns the do's and don'ts of how to open up the doorway of that consciousness, that the unmitigated, limitless power of that presence will radiate forth and establish the permanency of that for oneself. Even with the help or without the reinforcement of the Ascended Masters, it can be produced by the mighty I Am presence. The other part of this that we haven't yet touched upon, which we'll have to wait for another time, is the full measure of the cup of consciousness that is entering your world moment by moment. It is sometimes referred to as your crystal cord or your silver cord. You see it in the portrait of the presence, in that descending line that comes from the heart of the electronic body into your heart flame. You've been taught to understand this as some kind of universal electricity that is neutral and that is just a driving energy of the life of your God presence that drives the engines of the mind and feelings and the physical form. Well, it is that amongst other things, but frankly, that is one of the lesser outer sheaths of the crystal cord. Most important of all in this understanding is that the crystal cord is in fact the pure consciousness of the mighty I Am presence, the heart and mind of the presence is there in that consciousness, in that crystal cord energy. It is the outpouring of the individuality of your own mighty I Am presence that has within it the character lines that are unique to your presence. So there are levels of it that are synonymous for everyone, that are more or less universal for everyone, but there is also the charge that is put upon that crystal cord by the heart, head, and hand of the electronic body and the causal body of the individualized presence that make it the unique body and blood of your own individual presence. That is important because every point of that crystal cord energy is not only a level of energy, it is not only a level of substance, but it is also a level of consciousness, unique consciousness of your presence. Now, unbeknownst to most of mankind for a long time, they have been oppressing that consciousness. As soon as it hit the four lower bodies, it's been clamped on by depression and fear and anxiety and greed and lust and imperfection and violence and all of the host of maladies of the mortal consciousness that so overlay that you would never know what lies at its very white fire core. On the other hand, as you learn to treasure the crystal cord, the life that pours from your presence, and preserve it in the innate consciousness that is charged and imparted to it by your own mighty I Am presence, what is intended to occur is that consciousness is intended to build up, to be preserved in its original state as shining in the mind, preserved as shining in the feeling, preserved as shining and fire breath in the physical body. As it is preserved in this way, what occurs without any real trying on your part is that it builds up a cumulative impact. And that cumulative impact of all of these numberless electrons, each of which has their little thimbleful of the consciousness of your mighty presence, the cumulative effect of that when it is contained and preserved is that it builds up the Son of God, the consciousness of the only begotten. The vestments of the Christ are established in, through, and around the four lower bodies. And you begin to naturally express that stature that is your presence because it is given to you. The consciousness of your I Am presence is given to you and it has been preserved by you. And it builds up more and more the capacity to accumulate, the capacity to build up that energy is absolutely limitless. You can have any volume and magnitude of it that you can hold. It will remain polarized by the heart flame. And taken in its collective nature, it produces in you the birth of the Christos. So the Christos comes forth stepping through feeling, stepping through mind, stepping through the physical body, not just the outer trappings of it, but there is this personage that is born. And we'll end on this thought. Beloved Mary described how she held the Immaculate Concept for her infant Christ child throughout his infancy and adolescence. She described one time that he went out one afternoon, and when he came home, there was a new light shining in his eyes. There was a new penetrating intelligence of his God presence that was there in the eyes, the light in the eyes. And she knew that there had been a great illumination that had taken place in his world in that very moment, such that his own God presence had re-entered the vessel of the four lower bodies and was now in firm God command over that outer self. And that intangible light in the eyes is produced by the electronic body as the I am, that I am consciousness that each of you shall put on more and more as you allow that build up of the light of your presence to build up within your world. There are many, many aspects of that crystal cord and its consciousness. The sacredness of this light, the purity of it, the consciousness of perfection that comes along with it, the consciousness of illumination, the consciousness of transcendence that knows itself to be here and there, to be here and in the heart of the great central sun, that knows itself in the exalted, untrammeled realm of the ascended master octaves beyond the confinements of time or space. All of that is there in every electrons of the crystal cord, in the radiation that is thrown off by that. That is important for you to understand because it means you don't have to wump up that consciousness out of nothing. You don't have to feel like you're an ugly duckling who's expected to turn into the divine Paramhansa of the swan that glides calmly across the ocean of life by your own human struggle, but rather by allowing that glorious presence within you to do what that presence is intended to do.